And we're so happy to say Cillian Murphy joins us now. Good morning.
Morning. Good morning. Also so happy that it didn't destroy the world.
Yes,
The chain reaction did come to an end at some point. So far, anyway.
Gail said something in the green room that you've won every major acting award for playing a role.
Leading up to this,
leading up to this moment, for playing a role that Matt Damon, the brilliant Matt Damon, as General Leslie Groves describes as describing Oppenheimer, a dilettante, a womanizer, a suspected communist, unstable, theatrical, egotistical, neurotic, but also, Cillian, as you know, a genius who becomes death, destroyer of worlds.
Yeah.
How did you take on a role that was so monumental?
Yes, it was huge. I realized it was a big, big part when Chris Nolan called me back in September 21, I think it was, he called me. You know, I was aware of Oppenheimer. I was aware that he was the father of the atomic bomb, and I was aware of the Trinity test in 45, but everything that happened afterwards was kind of new to me, and that whole aspect of his life, and the hearing where he lost his security clearance and all of that, and how he kind of became, you know, vilified in American society, even though he had been the most famous scientist in the world. That's the kind of Promethean aspect of the story, I suppose. Yeah, so I knew it was a huge one, and I knew I had an awful lot of work to do as quickly as I could.
But you took the role without having read the script.
Yeah.
But you said it was the most terrifying role you've ever taken.
Yeah, I mean, terrifying in a good way, if that makes sense.
It does.
I love work that is very, very challenging and scares the life out of you because you think, how am I going to do this? It's such a huge thing to take on. That's the stuff that really gets me going, rather than something that I think, I know how to do that. You know, I love when it's just the biggest challenge you could imagine, really.
But you and Chris had worked together 6 times. This is your 6th project together, so there must have been some comfort level, too, working with him. You guys must, at this point, have your own secret language on how well you all work together, true?
Well, I think you develop a shorthand with people that you work with an awful lot, and you develop a trust, which is the most important thing you can have. You know, and there's a lot of the time we don't really talk about it too much. It just sort of happens on set because I feel really safe being directed by him and really secure, and you can really push yourself, and he pushes me.
But how are you taking all the reaction to the movie, and to you in particular, Cillian? Because there are some people, they get on stage, they go, yes, I deserve this, yes, I do.
Yes, look at me, Mom.
Yes, look at me, it was only a matter of time. But for you, there is such a humility and such a grace about you, almost like you're uncomfortable with all the attention, but at the same time, you know you're very good at what you do.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's a brilliant time for the film. None of us ever anticipated that the film would have, this response, just critically and, you know, commercially, and that the thing that I get most of a kick out of is people who stop me on the street and say, man, I've seen your movie 5, 6, 7 times. And you really realize that this is a story and a film that's really profoundly connected with people, and you know, that's very humbling, and we're all still kind of in shock.
In shock of it.
A little bit, yeah.
But look at your life's path, because I was reading about you that even as a kid, when you're on stage, it's your happy place.
Yeah.
You really, you act on instinct, and you're not afraid when you're acting.
I was
Tell
always...
us about your process, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think some kids are like that. You know, I always loved getting up in front of the adults when we were kids, and at the family gatherings and playing music and all of that stuff, and it felt really kind of natural to me. And I wouldn't say I'm the most outgoing, kind of gregarious person, but that...
I wouldn't say that either about you, Mr. Murphy, yes.
But being on stage, I always loved. And first of all, it was music for me, and then it was theater, and then eventually film.
There's we're all focusing on the acting. They're all very high-minded. I'm less so. There's a scene where you climb a ladder in the movie, and the wind is going crazy, and obviously no one's got control over the wind. It's not a wind machine.
Yeah.
Was that scary? I mean, we're going to show a clip of it here. You know, the stunt director says it was harrowing for him. So.
I mean, it wasn't so bad. Going up, coming down was the part I wasn't crazy about. You know, but we needed the wind to actually come up that day, because that was historically what happened, and it just all blew up at that precise moment where we needed it. So, you know, I was all tied up and everything, but it's still but that's what Chris does when he makes films. He puts the actor in the real environment as much as he possibly can, always.
Let me ask you a question for the Peaky Blinders fans out there, of which I am one. I know that you've said you don't want to give us, the fans, false hope, but if there was a compelling story to continue Tommy Shelby's story in a film, would you be open to doing that?
I think you kind of answered the question.
Because for you, it's about the story.
It's always about the story. It's always about the script. We have an amazing scriptwriter, Stephen Knight, who's written all 36 hours of Peaky Blinders. And if he feels like there's more story for Tommy, then I'll be there, you know?
Love that.
Has playing this role, focusing on the creation of the atomic weapon, has it altered your awareness of the fact that while we're sitting here right now, we're told there are atomic weapons pointing at us and we're pointing them at somebody else?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, it seems to have ebbed and flowed since 45, you know, our consciousness or awareness of it. And I think it's coming back now again. But it's an awful lot for people to carry around in your head, isn't it?
Yeah, really
That's
is.
sort of like that there is that sword of Damocles kind of there 24/7. So people choose not to. We have an awful lot to be getting on within our lives and be trying to try to get through the day. Yeah. But what I like about this movie is that it's a piece of entertainment, but it is provocative.
Yes,
it does ask
very
questions.
much so.
Incredibly.
And I like that in film. You know?
I can't wait for Oscar night.
Me too. Me too. We're
Just
cheering
saying.
you on.
Putting it out there.
Ready.
Cillian Murphy.
Christopher, thank you very much for being here. A lot of people don't like to think about that, but you've spent years thinking about the power of these weapons and the man behind it. What was it that fascinated you about it?
Well, what really fascinated me about Oppenheimer was looking into the historical reality. His story is just the most dramatic I've ever encountered. The suspense, the twists, the turns, all that stuff. And this seminal moment, the Trinity test, the anniversary of which was last weekend, where they changed the world. They changed the world we all live in and the world we will always live in. I grew up in the United Kingdom in the 1980s at a time of real fear of nuclear Armageddon. It was in the pop culture. And our relationship with the fear of nuclear Armageddon ebbs and flows over time. It's almost like we can't worry about it for too long. We get exhausted or something. The problem is the threat never actually goes away.
The human drama of this story is Oppenheimer becomes this public star, the father of the bomb. He won the war for America, saved American lives, but he's acutely aware, along with many, many, many other scientists, that the world has changed. And if an arms race to build ever and ever bigger bombs launches, we're all going to be living a very different life. He tried to prevent it, and he was persecuted politically for it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about his story that a lot of people know a little bit about, but not much, and for me, somebody who knows nothing about Oppenheimer is the ideal audience member for this film, because then they get to be surprised and shocked by everything that goes on. And the film is really an attempt to jump into his head, go through his experience. And the book I'm adapting, called American Prometheus, is subtitled The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And it's exactly that. He did incredible work for his country in the war. In a lot of ways, was seen to have won the war for the Allies. And then what happens to him in the period afterwards is pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And it's really a cautionary tale about the relationship between scientists, government, and the media.
I remember when this trailer dropped, I was sitting with some friends, and immediately we got excited, of course, a project of yours. But then we started this conversation about CGI and how it would be used in this film. But there isn't any CGI.
No, there's none.
And that was purposely done. How does that add to the element of the authenticity?
And there are lots of explosions.
Yes.
So they're real explosions.
It's really cleverly done, I'd have to say.
Well, thank you. One of the first people I showed the script to was my visual effects supervisor of several films, Andrew Jackson. And he's somebody who's worked with computer graphics, but he's also worked with analog methods, with old-time special effects, as it were. And I said to him, let's try and do this with no CG, because the thing about CG is it's incredibly versatile. You can do anything with it.
Right.
But as animation, as computer animation, it tends to feel a little bit anodyne, a little bit safe. So when you're making a movie that's textured, that you really want people to be in the room with these guys, to feel like they're in a real space, you need imagery that's going to have what I term that sort of bite, that kind of analog thing where it's a real thing you photograph.
Yeah.
So it can have incredible beauty. And we knew the Trinity test had to be the showstopper. It's the key thing in the film. It had to have incredible beauty and incredible threat. And it's difficult to make computer graphics threatening.
In the aftermath of the Trinity test, the U.S. government takes 2 models of that bomb, of course, drops them on Japan. The war is over. There's a moment of joy, of happiness, of celebration, of feeling like something terrible has passed. But then in the film, there's this incredible scene where Oppenheimer comes to realize psychologically that the really terrible stuff could be in the future.
Yet to come.
The way you portray that is with a scene in which he's looking out at an adoring crowd, cheering fans, and he starts to imagine a darker explosion right there in the room. And the face that your camera lingers on, a face that, I don't know exactly how to put this, but is essentially suffering the trauma of a nuclear explosion. It's your daughter's face, I come to read. How did that scene come together?
She was on spring break, and she's cheap and available.
It's such a heavy
Because
theme.
everybody else in the
Try
film
and keep
was...
it light.
Christopher, there has to be a deeper meaning.
I was going to say, I don't want to be psychoanalyzed on national television, so I resist any personal interpretations. But no, I mean, in truth, not to get too heavy about it, but it's an incredibly dark part of the film, a dark subject. And I don't want to give away too much for people who haven't seen the film yet going into it. But what we're looking for is his experience in his head. And so to me, it seemed to me that somebody who had been amongst the first people on Earth to witness nuclear fire, they would carry that with them and everything. And any time they're imagining the consequences of these weapons, they're going to be seeing the people around them, the people they love. They're going to be imagining that effect, and they're going to be able to imagine it with shocking clarity because he'd actually stood there in that bunker and watched that. And so I think, for me, yes, it was about looking to the people you love, looking to the things that you love, the world around you that you love and value, and imagining the destructive force of these weapons.
We also must mention the absence of some of the stars who, left the London premiere early to join the picket lines. You yourself are a writer. What is it you hope will happen as a result of the friction between actors, writers, and producers and studios in Hollywood?
Well, it's an important moment. It's the kind of moment that comes along every few decades, where the companies we all work for, they changed the basis on which they do their deals and they make their money completely in the last 5 years. They have not changed the contracts to pay people fairly according to that new world of the way in which they choose to make their money. And that has to change. It's terrible. It was very bittersweet to have the actors there supporting the film and then understanding that they needed to then leave and go on strike the way I've been on strike as a writer for over 2 months now. It's an incredibly important moment in our industry. Hopefully the dramatic action now of SAG, joining the strike will prompt the companies to much more swiftly look at how they have to shift the deal structure. And they do, and they need to do it so that we can all get back to work and get back to doing what we love.
I don't always say this, but you should watch this in the theater on the biggest screen you can get access to, because it is larger than life, but it is real life at the same time, and you feel that real life when you're in a big theater. Christopher Nolan, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.